Let's start. Yeah. All right. So I hope you had an interesting time studying how to apply deep learning to these tasks in space physics. So this time I will talk about more statistical methods that you can apply when you have not enough data. And I will also talk about a little bit of modeling. There will be a little bit of modeling, but quite simple. And this will be done in order to predict CME arrival times and probability of hitting the Earth. So first, I will start. I was thinking, how should I start? Should I start with the space physics, or should I start with statistics? And I thought it's better to bore you first with equations and then show you nice figures. So this starts from sort of a principle of how we should treat situations where we don't have complete knowledge about our system. Right? So there are two ways, there are two types of statistics that exist, and they often disagree with each other, how you should look at things. So in physics, we are more familiar with the frequentist view, which is that if you want to estimate what is the probability that something happens, you have to count. You have to count how many times you have tails, how many times you have heads when you flip a coin, and then you can estimate it. But in many realistic situations, we cannot actually perform all these experiments, and they don't even exist. But it's still useful to use some sort of value that will tell you how much you know about the system. And so this gets us into the Bayesian statistics and this formula, which I'm sure you're familiar with or at some point had to encounter, which relates the probability that A event happens conditional to B, and if you know B conditional to A, and you know these two probabilities, then you can infer the A given B. And also relates to the Occam's razor. Occam was actually a priest who came up with this, or is credited for this principle. And the principle is, if your system is, try to come up with as simple explanation for what you observe as you can. Yeah, it's interesting that it connects to beliefs about the system because it was conceived by a priest. So yeah. So now I'm going to talk about the Gaussian process regression because that's going to be the topic. And always there will be this backup thing, which is that we are trying to relate things to the biases view. And so the biases view is that you have so you can have two ways of looking at things. So you have the probability, the likelihood of the data that you observe given the model, and you can relate that to the probability of the weights of your model, or so to speak, in the machine learning tone, given the data, right? So we start from perhaps uniform. If we don't know anything about the system, we assume that everything is that our knowledge of the system is zero. Therefore, we assume uniform priors. And so this is an example of this. So this is some function spaces on which we don't know what kind of functions we're dealing with. And once we provide the data that constrains possible functions, and as you can see that as you go further from the data, your uncertainty increases. So very nice thing about these methods, they provide you with the uncertainty. So they are one disadvantage, so to speak, about neural networks is that oftentimes they don't tell you, they tell you the answer, but they cannot tell you what is the uncertainty. Although there are methods that are specifically designed for this, but I'm not going to cover this here. And so the simplest possible way of describing things is using linear approximation. So we have some data, that we have some dependence that we're trying to model with some weights. And assuming that things are Gaussian, and one is, if one is a statistician, one usually assumes Gaussian. Gaussians are very nice because, well, also they relate to the central limit theorem, which tells us that if you add a lot of things, they tend to be Gaussian. But also, if you do operations to Gaussian distributions, you end up with Gaussians. So if you marginalize, if you condition Gaussians, if you multiply them, so Gaussians are like a black hole of distributions. So it's very nice to work with them and to develop theories around them. And so here we're just going to do this trick of the biases equation. Assume that we have this likelihood for the data, which is multivariate Gaussian, right? So this is now a vector multiplication and dot product. And yeah, we don't need to go into the details of the math of it. Probably you had it in some statistic courses. But it's just a reminder that you can invert this to get the probability of the weights, which what we are looking for at the moment, and it will still be a Gaussian, but it will have this slightly more complicated expression for the weights, for the mean and for the covariance matrix. And this covariance matrix is a very important object. In fact, once you go to the function space, which looks a bit complicated, but it's pretty much the same thing that you saw before. You have the mean and you have the covariance, right? So this will tell you everything you need to know about your data and how to model your data, okay? And the simplest possible covariance function that is typically assumed is this squared exponential. These are also called kernels because kernels are things that appear inside the integrals, right? And in fact, there are also extensions of these things called kernel methods. And kernel methods, we can represent the data by these covariances, even if we don't know the exact functional dependence on the space in which we are. So if we're representing everything that we know about the system by some basis of this phi x, we don't actually have to know phi. We just have to get the kernels. It's called a kernel trick. And so when do you choose Gaussian process regression or other types of kernel methods like support vector machines, for example? It's when you don't have enough data, so like 10 to 10,000 points, for example, which actually is something that we encounter a lot in space physics. We often don't have that much data. It depends. And when you care about the calibrated uncertainty, right? Because the method is going to tell us what's the uncertainty of both the weights and the predictions that it's going to make. And yeah, if there are not many knobs, if you have lots of parameters, it's not going to work well. And of course, if you choose a neural network when you have very large data, more than thousands of points, and the inputs are high dimensional. And so this, I didn't put the reference. There's a very nice review article called Low Bias, High Variance, High Bias, Low Variance. Introduction to Machine Learning for for physicists, which has these kind of recipes, what one has to do when, for example, even optimizing the neural network architectures. But for any method, I'm not going to go into it, but I can provide this or just the link later. So now I'm going to jump into the solar wind and coronal mass ejection modeling. So I don't know if there was much modeling covered during this workshop, but I think it's worthwhile mentioning that to date we still use a sort of range of models that are specifically designed to a particular area, right? So near the sun, we have either semi-empirical models or models such as Coconut, which is a model developed by my advisor. So those models are MHD models like Coconut or semi-empirical models such as WSA, which we're going to use to propagate from the chronograph, from the magnetogram images to 0.1 AU and get the solar wind speed. And then we have a range of space solar wind modeling frameworks like Euphoria or Icarus. And then we have, once this reaches the Earth, we have lots of magnetospheric models. Again, many of them are empirical models. Some of them now are becoming machine learning models. And yeah, this is the pipeline usually, for example, for Euphoria. So you provide the magnetogram and then you have to run. I'm not going to go into the details how Euphoria works. I don't think we have time or interest in that because I'm going to use a different model actually, but it is an MHD model in this case. So they're more heavy to use. And they actually, the problem with using them is that, if you want to run a large ensemble, especially for the Coconut, which is actually the model that is also an MHD model, is a coronal model, it will be expensive to run a big ensemble. And that's the whole point about what we're doing here. And yeah, they will give you what's the velocity and density of the solar wind all across the heliosphere, including the Earth, where you can compare things to Omni data, for example. Now, so in our exercise session, we are not going to use the Wang-Shili RG model, which is a semi-empirical model for getting 0.1 AU solar wind. we're going to use actually WSA Plus, which actually is a neural network, but it's not, you will not have to interact with it at all. It's just downloaded and used. So it's a network developed by a colleague, Pratik Mayank. And it's a framework that is illustrated here. If you're interested, you can look up his publication. But it doesn't matter again for the exercise. It just will give us the speed map at 0.1 AU. So for the heliospheric model, we're going to use a very simple model. It's called HUXT model, heliospheric upwind extrapolation, which is actually just a Burger's equation. So very, very, very simple. And actually, this model is completely fine to use. In fact, in some say for these types of questions, it's competitive with in fact, even more simple models such as drag-based models for CMEs may outperform more physics-based models. And so the real problem is not often that we don't know enough physics about the basic physics about these systems, but we don't have the right initial conditions for these models. But yeah, so that's going to be the model. There's a few things that there is a residual acceleration that you apply because the solar wind gets accelerated, but it doesn't matter again for us because we're not going to run these. So we're just going to run the model. We're not going to look into the nitty-gritty details of this model. And because it is a model that is only Burger's equation, so there is one missing piece, which is very important actually for impact of space weather, which is the magnitude of the magnetic field. That is BZ component that really tells you something about geomagnetic effectiveness of the CMEs. The problem is that even with really cool models, it's really difficult to predict it anyway. So hopefully in the future it will be possible to predict it better, but with some developments in both data assimilation and improvements to models. But here we're going to ignore that BZ completely, and we're only going to work with a very simple model for the CME called cone CME model. In this model you have just few parameters. There's no magnetic field involved. And as usual, what you do, actually, you don't do that. We will just take the provided parameters for the CMEs, but it's just helpful to know how these things are obtained. So people look at coronagraphs and they kind of try to estimate the shape of a CME from the structure that is here. And actually, since this is a machine learning course in general, it's worth mentioning that nowadays, of course, there are people trying to use segmentation to find the structure of a CME. But you can see that it's a very difficult problem because there's lots of effects that, you're looking at some dense plasma and you're looking at the projection. So there are projection effects. So your estimation of the parameters is going to be imprecise. So it's actually interesting to know how the forecast depends on those parameters. And in fact, what people do often is they have to run an ensemble of models where they vary these parameters. And actually, here there are at least 5 parameters that you have to vary, and 5 parameters is actually not small. And as it increases, as the complexity of your model for the CME increases, it becomes a high dimensional problem. So there must be some ways we can reduce this. And so I'm going to mention briefly this, which I actually stole from Stefan Putz, this slide. Who is my advisor who works on the coconut model. And yeah, so the idea is to find a way to do ensemble forecasting without running all these runs, right? And that's what we're going to do. So we're going to apply Gaussian process regression to build a model for the CME as a function of the cone parameters, such as the size of this CME, the width of it, the latitude, longitude, and velocity. And so the pipeline in the exercise is going to consist from the gong magnetogram, which was discussed, so I'm not introducing it. So you have to download the appropriate magnetogram. Then you run this WSA Plus model, which I mentioned, which is trained as a surrogate model for WSA, which is also a semi-empirical model. But according to our colleague, it works better. So we don't care. It's just a little step in this pipeline. Then what is done is you have to find where's the Earth, because if you take the equator, that's not quite right, and the Earth tends to vary. But this SunPy or some other, or maybe AstroPy package it's already, you don't actually have to code this. Don't worry, it's inside it's already automatically kind of plug and play sort of thing. But just for you to know that there has to be the track for the Earth that is provided, that is correct track. So the coordinates of Earth are important. Actually, it's also a way to estimate uncertainty. There was a paper by Owens using this method. Actually, no, I should say it was a paper by Matthew Piltcliffe, I think. Yeah, but it was with Owens. Yeah, and so if you do that, you get this kind of speed profile, right? And then you put that speed profile into the model, into the solar wind model, which is in our case is going to be Huxley, right? So this is actually time independent. So you just kind of swap this because you know that the sun is rotating like this. These are called Carrington rotations. And we just take up the appropriate Carrington rotation and we generate this kind of thing. So it's not as accurate as it could have been if it was time dependent, but we don't care. I mean, it's just an exercise. Okay, so this is where you can find both the source code and the tutorials is here on my website inside Projects Concast. And we're going to produce these kind of figures where you will predict the probability that the CME hits given the CME parameters, and you can look at different projections because you have 5 parameters. You can choose latitude, longitude, so this is the probability from 0 to 1. Also time of arrival, which is can be also scanning all these based on a certain number of runs. So we will perform up to 300 runs of this model by just sampling from different parts of the space. And yeah, so that's pretty much the idea. And then estimate the uncertainty of this, of the time of arrival. And yeah, and that's going to be the exercise. And I think I am done in time. Do you have any questions? Yeah.
Isn't Gaussian process very slow when you are trying to sample a large space? I mean, it is going to be slower than any of the neural networks or any of the machine learning methods.
Yeah, it is going to be slow. As I was mentioning, there is a trade-off. So if you have lots of training points, but we have 300 training points in this case. I mean, if you have like below 1,000 or something like this, here I think it says, where was that? Yeah, here it says 10,000 is kind of a ceiling. So that's where you would use that. But actually, in this case, I mean, in a realistic scenario, so Huxley you could run for 10,000 actually and more because it's relatively cheap. But like a framework that would be including a realistic model, like a realistic MHD model, and which is what they do in our group, for example, that is actually expensive. And there you will not be able to have like an ensemble with 10,000 members. You would have to have much fewer members. So it's just a way to, and again, you could use it, even if you had more runs, you could just take fewer of them, like you can subsample. It will give you a good estimate about where to look for new runs. So you could do active learning. You could basically say, okay, I perform, let's say 1,000 first runs, and it would tell me where is the highest uncertainty. And there you would put your points and it would start resolving, sort of in that way. So that's the idea. And with neural networks, there is ways to have uncertainty, but it's kind of like a topic of research. With dropout, for example, I think it's the best way. Not the Bayesian neural networks. Yeah. Yeah. Other questions?